I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Happy Halloween, Kiki!
Happy Halloween Tuesday!
Yes, this is the final episode of the spooky season, our Halloween-themed episode. And for our special Halloween episode, we are not alone.
Will our mystery guest enter and sign in, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Whitmire, and I am a comedy and horror musician, and I'm excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, Jeff Whitmire, member of the Fump, very good friends of ours.
Yep.
As a comedy musician, we've never had one of those on the show before.
It's been a while since we had one, though.
Yeah.
And of course, as you said, you've kind of gotten into the horror over the last year or so.
Yeah, and I've always been a huge horror fan. And just a couple years ago, it just kind of happened organically. Where I was kind of in a rough patch doing music in the middle of the pandemic, and why am I doing this and everything? And they released a movie called Host in the middle of the pandemic, and I said, well, if they can make that movie, then I have no excuse but to keep doing music. And I figured, well, if I'm going to go back, let's kind of merge my two things. So, ever since then, I've been primarily doing funny horror songs.
So this week, our movie is, of course, the 1980s classic starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, Earth Girls Are Easy. No.
That's later. We're doing that later.
I think Lionsgate...
Transylvania 65000.
I forgot about that one. Oh, God.
There's
did
three of them.
Yeah, there's three movies they did together in the 80s.
Yep.
Well, they were together at the time, so I understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, I think Lionsgate owns Earth Girls Are Easy, but I will check. But we are doing the 1986 film The Fly, the remake of the classic 1958 horror movie. Help me!
And also owned by Fox, so we may revisit that in a future Halloween. That one has Vincent Price and, interestingly, Betty Lou Gerson, Cruella de Vil herself, is in that one, yeah. As a smaller role, but, she is in that for your Disney connection there.
And really, we're doing the 80s version of The Fly because that's the version we grew up with.
And also, we're on a Jeff Goldblum kick.
Yeah, we did do Thor Ragnarok not too long ago, so we're doing another Jeff Goldblum movie.
And it makes sense, too, because I think, these days, a lot of times if you mention The Fly, I love the 50s version, but if you mention The Fly these days, I think most people, 9 out of 10, are going to be thinking of the 80s version,
Yeah.
It really has captured the zeitgeist, I think, more so than the 50s version.
Right.
And honestly, this kind of completes almost every kind of horror movie that you could get, because we started out with your vampires and What We Do in the Shadows. We handled the comedy stuff really with the Treehouse of Horror episodes, a little bit of slasher with Jennifer's Body, the psychological horror in The Omen, and now we get to body horror in The Fly.
Right.
Yeah, the master of body horror here was Cronenberg.
Mm-hmm.
This movie was the only one he ever got an Oscar for, though.
For makeup effects, yeah.
Yeah.
And well-deserved, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially we'll get to it, but the fly at the very end of the movie, yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was reading about this, and when they first screened the movie, like one of the first screenings, instead of having the cast come up, they actually had the makeup credit come up first, and the crowd exploded. And one of the producers turned to the guy who did the effects, and he goes, "You're going to win an Oscar," and he did.
I mean, That was very easy to predict.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the same guy that did the effects for this was the guy who did the face melting sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Same dude. So that's where we're coming from, and also he worked on Gremlins as well. So I mean, guys got the cred.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I will drop this in now. This is a hard R movie. We are going to have a hard R conversation. So if you are one of our listeners that do listen to these episodes with your little ones, you might want to come back next week, because
this is not a discussion for the little ones.
I mean, seriously, if the cameras in this movie were about a half a foot in a different direction, we'd be seeing the full Goldblum and the full Gina Davis.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, if you listen to this with your little ones, we will talk to you next week. Everybody else, strap in.
Yeah. The first choice to direct the movie was Cronenberg. I mean, they wanted David Cronenberg immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, David Cronenberg wasn't available because he was going to go work on a movie called Total Recall. So they got another director, but the director that they got, unfortunately, had an issue where that director, his family was vacationing in a different country, and there was an accident that unfortunately took the life of his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so that guy had to be like, hey, gotta go be with my family, can't do this movie. And it turns out that in all of that happening, some things had happened on Total Recall that led to Cronenberg being like, yeah, this is not the movie I want to make. Peace out. And Total Recall was taken over by Paul Verhoeven. This leads me to think, oh my God, what would Total Recall have been like if David Cronenberg had made that movie?
I mean, there was already body horror in Total Recall as it is, but just, that would be a completely different movie.
Yeah.
I feel like, I was talking about this recently with someone, and I feel like we can get into this. There were a lot of strange choices that were going into this movie, who was going to be in it and who was going to make it. And would be a vastly different movie, both The Fly and Total Recall, if things had worked out differently. I think the stars aligned to give us the perfect movie with The Fly. Because actually, I there's rumors that Tim Burton was going to step in to The Fly, and Michael Keaton was going to play. Michael Keaton was going to play the Seth role. To be like the Fly Batman, actually. But yeah,
and this is just a few years before Beetlejuice.
Yeah,
also starring Gina Davis.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the thing a lot of people forget is that the production company behind this film is Brooks Films.
Yes.
Mel Brooks's company.
Yeah.
That Mel Brooks.
Although he didn't want his name on it because he thought it would steer people away.
Well, I mean, Brooks Films is still on there, but not Mel Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't see the name Mel Brooks really.
Right.
But Brooks Films is still the production company. So if you know Hollywood well enough, you're like, wait a minute, what?
Well, my favorite fact about The Fly is that Mel Brooks is actually the one that came up with the famous line, because he was asked. There were some actors and performers who were asking him, "How are we to react to the transformation scenes?" And he said, "Be afraid, be very afraid."
Yeah.
So the famous line from this movie actually came from Mel Brooks of all people, which I think is really cool.
I'm not even sure I had heard that story before. That's kind of really fascinating. The thing about it to me is that we see so often that the people who do comedy end up being really good at horror, and kind of vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of, the other Fly film, I mean, Vincent Price was incredible at horror, horror and comedy, both. So if you ever got to see, and we did Young Frankenstein last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Mel Brooks was able to weave both of those together,
right?
Those sensibilities to make a comedy movie, but that drew from the, and I know that Jeff, both of you and I are fans of Jordan Peele.
Yes.
Who was able to go from such a brilliant comedy career into a brilliant horror career.
Three of the best movies of the past, 5 years. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and not just the best horror movies, but just three of the best movies.
Oh, easily, yeah.
That have come out.
Right.
And when asked about it, he has spoken extremely eloquently about how comedy and horror really function on the same structure in the building of anticipation and, delivery of a punchline and delivery of a scare being almost exactly the same mechanic in the end. And I find it really fascinating to listen to him break that down, because they are almost identical.
And
the
timing aspect of it,
yeah. So a lot of people, when you don't understand that connection to be something like, wait, why is Mel Brooks producing a horror film or whatever? It doesn't seem like it fits, but when you understand the mechanics of it, you're like, oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Right. And to find out how good a lot of comedic actors are at horror, or horror actors are at comedy, also makes perfect sense to.
I feel like there's always kind of been that part of it too. I was just thinking about this because I was watching Jaws the other day with my kids. If anyone knows me, I'm a huge shark movie fan, and of course Jaws is the OG. So, but even just those, because Spielberg was good at this too. Because within the first 5 minutes of Jaws, you have the guy like having trouble taking off his clothes, and it's actually a really funny scene. So, directors do find those ways to sneak the humor into the terrifying, because of course everything that happens after that scene is frightening. So, but there is sort of a marriage there. I agree with you. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why Goldblum kept, he popped in and out in the 80s and 90s in these horror movies is because he was so good at weaving the comedic into the horror, and he does it in The Fly so well. He's so disarming.
Jurassic Park too.
Yeah, and Jurassic Park, and he's so disarming in, especially as Seth Brundle, that he starts out as this, kind of goofy, eccentric scientist, and by the end of it, you are terrified of this man. So he's great at kind of crossing those lines throughout the movie. So he was a perfect choice, and I don't, when you talk about other people that was done, I heard it was also they had approached John Lithgow, but I think he could have maybe done a similar job, but I think that as far as being the kind of eccentric who it could be frightening, I mean, go watch John Lithgow in Dexter. Good.
Yeah, right. Raising Cain was another one. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, but I found that Dexter turned to be just exceptional.
Yeah.
I think that Jeff Goldblum hit the perfect beat of he's quirky and then he gets like really sexy for a bit and then he gets just absolutely terrifying and then he just gets like really sad and empathetic and you know it's such a really roller coaster transformation. So
yeah, his arc from the beginning to the end of this movie is incredible.
Yeah.
And what the effects of the experiment did to him. Yeah.
And I really hesitate to think of anybody else in this particular role.
Have you heard any of the other people that turned it down before this that were actually offered it?
I mean, the ones you've mentioned and Lithgow, I think, are kind of.
There's also Mel Gibson was offered it and turned it down.
I know he can. I mean, he can do it because of. I mean, I've seen Lethal Weapon, but I don't know if he could have pulled this off.
Right, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, another Richard Dreyfuss that could, and also James Woods were all offered it and turned it down. But and I could see different takes on the movie, but like I said, I felt like this was a perfect storm because now that we have Jeff Goldblum and The Fly, I just can't see it any other way. To me, he's the perfect person for this role.
And we have to talk about how they changed the story.
Yeah.
Because the 1958 film really went for just a direct interpretation of the original short story.
Right.
Because these are both based on a short story. This is getting close to an in-name only adaptation.
Right.
There's teleporters, there's a guy that transports with a fly, and that's kind of where the story ends. The similarities end.
Right.
Except for the mutation of the fly is so different in the original story. It's just that one of his arms and his head kind of get swapped.
Yeah.
It's not like a fusion of DNA.
Yeah, it was basically he was a fly in the first one, whereas he became a combination.
The closest, I mean, at least for more contemporary viewers, would be the Simpsons version of the Fly, which is more closer to the original film.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's more a murder mystery, the first one. And it's a lot of a woman sitting in a room freaking out anytime she hears a fly buzz. It's like 90% of the first film is just, a woman sitting in a really nice, quote unquote, insane asylum going like, did you hear the fly buzz? Wait, catch that fly. Don't harm it. Wait, because it could possibly still be her husband, and then it's just the mystery of like, why is this woman obsessed with flies all of a sudden?
Right.
But this is just like, well, what if a man and a fly got fused together and you watch him slowly lose his humanity while becoming a more and more grotesque thing, which is less a murder mystery about what happened to a guy and isn't it sad, and more an existential crisis, Kafka-esque nightmare.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of prefer this version because I think it's a little more horrific. Supposedly, Jeff Goldblum wrote a letter to Vincent Price when the film came out.
Yeah.
That said, like, that invited him to go see an early screening or something.
Yeah, he had said he loved his version and he hoped Price would love his.
Yeah, and apparently Vincent Price did send some sort of letter back or something and said, I thought it was charming up to a point, and then it went too far.
I'm kind of wondering which part of this movie Vincent Price
like, did he make it past the arm wrestling scene and then...
Yeah, right.
Like, exactly. Yeah, I also wondered that. I was like, what exactly is
What was Vincent Price's threshold in this movie?
Where exactly was the line for Vincent Price? I would desperately love to know that.
Right.
Having heard various stories about Vincent Price, that is a thing that I would love to know.
I mean, he's a master of horror. He's one of the icons. But I mean, his movies were definitely far more tame than what they were putting out in the 80s. So it might have been a little bit of a culture shock to him.
I just want to say that Howard Shore did not have to go as hard as he did on the score, but he did that for us, and I think we need to bow down.
Thank you, Howard Shore.
Yeah, because this score goes so absolutely balls to the wall.
And there's a story that Mel Brooks, because Mel Brooks was actually more involved, I think, in the film than you'd expect, given what it was about. But I guess he was watching a cut with Cronenberg, and there was one section where Seth's just walking down the street, and the music is blasting, like Shore is cranking it up, and Brooks even asked him, like, why is the score doing this? Why is it like this when he's just walking down the street? And Cronenberg actually said, no, he's walking to his destiny. So like it was all very intended, but I agree. I think what they did with Shore's score was not conventional by any means, but it worked a lot.
Yeah, because there are points in this movie where suddenly you're just like, oh my God, why am I so hyped right now? Nothing is going on, but I just want to get up and run around the room.
Right.
And that is absolutely 100% to, And of course, can we maybe just think that this might be the thing that got him the job on Lord of the Rings? Because Peter Jackson's such a horror freak that he was probably like, who am I going to get to score Middle-earth? I know, the guy that did The Fly.
Yeah, and I have to assume The Fly was an inspiration for like Jackson's early stuff, like Dead Alive and Bad Taste, and I could definitely see that having been in the back of his mind. Yeah. If we're gonna score,
some of the stuff in Feebles and Dead Alive and stuff is like so very like, I want to be David Cronenberg.
Definitely.
You could just feel that. So you had to know that like somewhere in the back of his mind was like, I really want to work with the guy who did The Fly.
Yeah, right.
So let's talk about because we've talked about Jeff Goldblum before. He's Jeff Goldblum. I mean,
he's Jeff Goldblum. Bow down and worship him.
He's Jeff Goldblum. If you don't know who Jeff Goldblum is, I'm sorry.
If I just look in one direction right now in the room I'm in, there's a sexy Jeff Goldblum Funko Pop just hanging out.
There's some sexy Jeff Goldblum in this movie.
There is, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's maybe why I loved this movie as a kid.
There's some gooey Jeff Goldblum, but there's also some sexy Jeff Goldblum.
Of course, Gina Davis.
There's some sexy Gina Davis in this movie.
Oh yeah. As I said earlier, shift that camera about a foot the other direction, you're seeing everything.
Yep.
And of course, at the time, as I mentioned before, Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis were a couple, so they would work together. They were as Jeff mentioned, they were together in 3 films.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, she's Gina Davis.
Gina Davis wasn't the first choice either for The Fly, I don't believe. But Jeff was like, I'm going to be in this. Let's keep this going. I mean, we've worked together before, and so he pushed hard for Gina to be in it. And I guess she did come in and audition, and that was it for Cronenberg. He's like, yeah, and then they auditioned people after her, and he said nobody even came close to what she was bringing to the film.
I don't want to act like there's a reason for her not to be in this movie. She absolutely kills it in this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I'm not going to sit there and undersell it there. But she is just so good in this. And I mean, you can see this was so near the beginning of her career, though.
Right.
And you can see that beginnings of where she would end up. There is a lot asked of her emotionally in this film, and she delivers every second of it. So I think knowing where her career would kind of end up after this.
Right.
I mean, Thelma and Louise, League of Their Own.
Yeah.
Cutthroat Island.
Yeah. You just had to get that dig in there.
Had to.
You couldn't just let it be. You couldn't just
Why is that
like,
the only reaction to Cutthroat Island ever?
Yeah. It was easy for me watching this to go like, all right, she's you could see where she was gonna have that career.
Yeah.
Because this is such an odd movie, and half the time it's like she's acting opposite all of that heavy, grotesque makeup. Jeff Goldblum, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult, you know?
Yeah.
Most of her, like, more difficult emotional scenes are opposite that. So I know how weird and off-putting that probably was for someone just starting their career. But bravo to her for absolutely meeting that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
John Getz is Stathis Borans. The ex. I mean, I'm gonna get it. We'll get into it when we get into the actual story, but I really only know him from this movie, honestly.
Well, he's one of those that's like hey, that guy, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I've seen him in so many other things, but it's always in the like, oh hey, yeah. Like
he does have
the guy. It's the guy from The Fly 2.
He does have a Disney connection because he was in Xenon the sequel,
which we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's also in like The Social Network, and then I saw him in Trumbo, which is really good.
Was in Zodiac.
And
currently in Doom Patrol.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, he's always there. He's in, you know, shows up in Better Call Saul, which I'm going through right now, you know.
American Horror Story, he was in Apocalypse.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, you know, he keeps popping up in stuff that I watch, but right. it's never like huge roles where I'm like
you said, he's kind of like that guy role, yeah.
Yeah. But he's always good. I mean, you know, I won't knock the guy, you know, he's a good, solid actor that, you know, I'm never like, oh, him again, you know, it's always like, oh, hey, you know, like, I'm always pleased to see him, so, but yeah, you always do kind of think of him as like, oh, it's that Dick from The Fly.
Yeah.
Because this is the role where he first clicked in my brain.
Right.
And there's always going to be that role for an actor, you know? I mean, you can't help it.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they're like the biggest of huge stars where it just kind of, it disconnects and you're like, okay, you know, I recognize them outside. As,
Bruce Campbell. I mean, he's been in so much stuff, but I hear Bruce Campbell and I obviously think Ash. You know, it's just one of those roles kind of.
But also he's just Bruce Campbell, you know.
Well, that's true.
You know, it's you know, or Jeffrey Combs for me, you know, is like,
oh yeah,
you know, it's like, yeah, he's always playing bit parts, but you know, it's just Jeffrey Combs because I love him so much. But most actors,
who was also in a Peter Jackson film.
Oh yeah, no. That's how I knew Peter Jackson, honestly, is like, I knew him because it was just, I was going through Jeffrey Combs' filmography, and then they were like, hey, there's some guy who's going to direct Lord of the Rings. We've never heard of him before. And I'm like, the guy who directed the Jeffrey Combs movie? Like,
did you watch the Jeffrey Combs shark movie? Because that one's a trip.
Oh, yeah. You know me. You've met me.
Yes. That's what I always like to mention to people, and they're like, "I'm sorry, the what?"
Yeah. But my point being, that there's always going to be that role you an actor from, and for John Getz, he's always going to be the douchebag from the line.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really, there are not a lot of parts in this movie. You got the main three characters, you got a few side actors, and then you've got David Cronenberg showing up in a guest spot.
And right at the end of the movie as the gynecologist.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's the gynecologist that's in the dream sequence, so you don't really see his face because he's got the mask on, but he's the one that brings out the sort of maggot, creature.
Apparently that happened because when Scorsese met Cronenberg, he said he reminded him of a doctor.
Huh.
So I guess if Scorsese says, something, you kind of go with it.
I thought it was interesting that he put himself in the movie.
Yeah. That's very Hitchcockian of him.
Yeah.
It's amazing that going from the beginning of the film and then going to the end of the film, how Brundle and Stathens kind of switch roles.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of the movie, Brundle is this, socially awkward scientist. He's trying to hit on Ronnie, and he's kind of like, the good guy boyfriend, and Stathens is the asshole ex-boyfriend who just happens to be her boss.
Right.
And who gets insanely jealous when he finds out that, she's sleeping with the magician, as he calls him.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the third act, Brundle has completely lost his humanity. He's all, I have to make this experiment. I'm going to merge us and Ronnie and the baby, and it's kind of Stathens. Stathens is the one that takes Ronnie to the doctor and kind of saves the day at the end.
Right.
He's still an asshole. Stathens is still an asshole throughout the entire movie, but that role change, that heel face turn, that double turn, as we call in the wrestling business.
Is it really that he's changed that much, or is it just by default?
Yeah, default, I would say.
Seth has lost so much of his humanity that even the douchebag is the sane option by default.
Right.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I don't really think he's changed that much personality-wise, because his core values, if you want to call them that, have still kind of remained consistent in the fact of she's like, well, I'm pregnant, and he's immediately like, well, we got to get that thing out of you.
Right. Yeah.
And
like his motivations for the end, I don't know if they're necessarily, I'd say they were good. I mean, he had an excuse to show up and save the day, but he could have taken Seth out in the process, which is, I think, the plan.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the end, it is, yes, it ends up being a good thing because he does end up saving Ronnie, but it's also just kind of like, hi, I'm here to be the hero white knight and take out my romantic rival and get my girlfriend back and get rid of my rival's child, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, yes, it seems the heroic thing to do because of what Seth has become, but honestly, had Seth not transformed, he probably would have kind of still done the same thing, possibly minus the shotgun.
Maybe, right.
Yeah.
And I only say possibly minus the shotgun.
Possibly.
Because you can kind of see him showing up with the shotgun anyway.
No, I carry this everywhere I go.
Yeah. This is just in the trunk of my car. Why do you ask?
I never break into a random lab without my shotgun.
I mean, this is the guy who breaks into her apartment at the beginning of the movie to take a shower, and when she says, "Give me my apartment key back," he says, "No, I think I'm going to keep it."
Yeah.
I mean, that is go to the cops, Ronnie.
Right.
I mean, it's the 80s, so they're probably just going to be like, well, you gave him the key.
Well, Ronnie makes some questionable choices throughout the film, so...
She herself admits this very early on in the movie, that she makes questionable life decisions and is incredibly lazy.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, even in 2022, that's the same scenario, Kiki.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, you know.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, cops and domestic abuse and stuff, not really a great fit, but the problem being, like, legally speaking, if she is the one on the lease of that apartment or the owner of that apartment and she says, "Give me back my key," you know, give her back her key.
And then he publicly embarrasses her at the clothing shop.
Yeah.
And, you know, he does the thing where he threatens her and Seth with the cover of the magazine, which is why she leaves. And I'm not saying Seth handles this well, because, you know, own your own shit here, Seth, but that is the inciting incident that leads to him getting drunk and getting in the machine in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'm not blaming Ronnie for that. You know, that's Seth's issue. But the fact that, you know, Stathis or whatever the hell his name is, that's a stupid name, by the way. Change your name. Your name is dumb. It's the name of a douchebag. Like, don't date that guy. That guy has a dumb name. But anyway, the fact that Stathis has sent that as a direct threat, like, you know, come negotiate. And his negotiation is, okay, you can date him, but come see me for casual sex on the side.
Right. Yeah.
Or I'll publish this and ruin his career and yours, because his career depends on this staying secret until he perfects the technology.
Right.
To protect his design.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's why he goes into the panic mode. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to prove this thing works, you know, in his drunken state. And
well, he doesn't know what the problem is. He thinks that she's going off to see her ex-boyfriend. I mean, it's very much a personal thing.
Yeah.
But he just wants to prove he's the big swinging dick with the smart brain, you know?
Right.
But Stathis really is trying to ruin Seth's life on a professional level. I mean, this could cost him everything if he publishes that article. So It's not an empty threat. I mean, this is a massive deal, because Seth tells Ronnie at the beginning of the movie, like, you cannot publish this. It will ruin me.
Right.
You know, I brought you into this because I trusted you to stay and document the story until it's ready for publication. You know, he was taking a risk on her.
Right.
Because he liked her, let's be real.
Oh, yeah.
It's true. I'm not saying that he probably wasn't, you know, thinking with the wrong brain there, but that was his thing. I was taking a risk that you would, one, believe me, because really, Stathis had the right idea. Because when I first watched this movie, even as a kid, I was like, yeah, I've seen that magic trick before.
Right.
If I was that girl and he was like, oh, look, your stocking went into this cabinet and reappeared in that cabinet, I would have been like, I've seen the cabinet trick before. Like,
right.
That is a mainstay of illusion magic. Thank you. But he was hoping that she would, you know, understand and go with it. So the fact that Stathis was like, I will ruin your boyfriend, or you can pay me in sex,
right,
is one of the most disgusting things. Fox.
It's full on blackmail, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are no good guys here except for maybe Ronnie, who just has really shitty taste in men.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that no one ever brings up, and I really never thought about it until doing this rewatch. Okay, he goes when all of this happens, and Seth goes into the teleporter. I'm going to prove this works, and he's drunk and doing all of this, and the fly comes in, and all that stuff happens. He gets a complete 180 personality change.
Right.
He goes from being this socially awkward guy to suddenly he's talking loud in restaurants. He's going out with other women. He's
a gymnast.
He's a gymnast now. Does that have anything to do with the fact that he had alcohol in his system?
No.
And I never thought about this till actually watching this again. Because yes, the fly is influencing something, but he also had alcohol in his system.
Right.
Which is now, because of the way the technology works, that is now a permanent part of its body at a molecular level.
So maybe that out because when you're drunk, your personality is altered anyway. Maybe that played a role in his personality changes after the transformation. Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, maybe. I mean, it's certainly something I had never considered. I always took it to be that his personality became very, for lack of a better term, because flies are very, they're very fast.
Right.
So everything he does tended to be, after that point, very much urgent, because a fly has such a short lifespan comparatively. So
flies are strong for what they are, like.
Well, yeah.
What they're able to. I mean, they actually are able to lift things that theoretically maybe they shouldn't. So there's that side of it too, and they are agile, and the gymnast side of things.
It works for Spider-Man.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But also, he immediately, they do the thing with the sugar,
right.
Him putting all the sugar in the coffee and then immediately wanting, bakery items, and,
right.
He's eating cannoli and donuts and stuff like that immediately and stuff. But it always struck me as, well, if your lifespan is only, couple of weeks, a month, or whatever the lifespan of fly is, it's just kind of like, oh my God, I want to do things now. I want to do all the things now. I've got to do things now. I've got to, eat and mate and, whatever a fly would find important.
Right.
Right now. All of it now. So that to me seemed like what he was doing. Like, I have to perpetuate my species, and his species is now Brundlefly.
Right.
So that's why he's immediately going out and being like, no, you've got to get into the teleporter. It's going to make you feel... Because even though he doesn't understand what happened to him, he knows that whatever happened to him is because of what happened in the teleporter.
Right.
So he's like, he starts out with Ronnie, and then Ronnie's not down for it, so he goes out and he finds the other girl in the bar during that amazing arm wrestling scene, which is just every time you watch it, you just go like, oh my God, no, this is the worst cringe in the movie.
Shudder is currently doing a weekly 101 scariest movie moments, and The Fly showed up, and I expected the end, or I expected the vomiting sequence or something. No, they went with the arm wrestling one. They're like, it's so like that's one scene that I think anyone you're gonna wince every time you watch it. Because
you're probably. Yeah, you're probably never going to be in a situation where a hybrid man-fly vomits on your leg, and
you'd be surprised at how often it happens. But I mean,
maybe. Just, I mean, me personally, maybe
I actually bumped into one at the grocery store the other day, but we got into a little fight over the sugar actually. But
I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, assume.
No, it's. I mean, I've gotten over it. It's good. It's okay. Thank you though. I appreciate that.
I mean,
my arm is healing. It's
I would say that I fear on a daily basis more, my arm being snapped into by random occurrence.
That's a hell of an effect too.
It's such a good special effect, makeup effect there with the arm. Although you kind of do you do get a little bit of Schadenfreude for the guy, who's like, whatever, I can take Jeff Goldblum, because you're kind of still on Seth's side at the time. Yes. Like, that things are going bad, but when you first watch the movie, you're not aware of how bad things are going yet.
I mean, you've had clues at that point, that the hairs and obviously his behavior changes. So there's red flags, but you're still... Yeah.
You're still like, oh, this is still sexy Jeff Goldblum. I'm still vibing with him, So when he shows up in the bar and he's like, I can take you in an arm wrestling match.
I sure hope he never changes from this. He'll be
and everything, like the other guy's like, no, shut up, Jeff Goldblum. You're like, yeah, you take him, Jeff Goldblum. You break his arm, like you're still kind of on his side. So even though it's an absolutely horrific moment, the first time you watch the movie, you're like, yeah, that's what you get for talking to Jeff Goldblum like that.
And just casually putting his girlfriend on the line in the arm wrestling match.
Right, yeah.
Well, also, you're kind of like, well, I'm not liking that you're cheating on Ronnie, but also it's Jeff Goldblum in the 80s, and Jeff Goldblum in the 80s can totally get it, so...
Right.
You're kind of okay with... I mean, Jeff Goldblum now can totally get it, so I'm not really saying.
That hasn't changed at all.
that has not changed in the slightest. But you're still kind of like, I mean, I don't know, to take her back, see if Ronnie's down for it, but the
spoiler, Ronnie was not down for it.
Yes. Spoiler alert, Ronnie was not as cool as we hoped Ronnie was going to be about this. But I mean, the whole thing is that, Seth in his early Brundlefly stages is just desperately trying to find a mate. I mean, this is early Frankenstein's monster here. Right. It's just like, hi, I am the first of my species. I need a mate.
He's not thinking of the importance of monogamy at this point.
Yeah. I mean, well,
he straight up says it. If you don't want to be part of, as he said, the dynamic duo, I'll find someone who will.
Right. Yeah.
And that's all he is. And it's a really interesting kind of biological imperative, because he does not yet realize that he is a new species.
Right.
But genetically he does.
Right.
That,
it's not. I mean, it's not too long after the sequence of events that finally becomes clear, where he does do the research and follow up, and he's like, oh, that's what happened. But yeah.
Well, and it is Ronnie that triggers that realization, because she's like, hey, I trimmed your gross back hairs. And I took them to a lab, because that's what girlfriends do, apparently.
Also, you had fingernails before. Something's going on.
Yeah. You're now starting to shed bits of you that maybe you shouldn't be shedding. So, I mean, trimming your nails is one thing. Biting them completely off, not great. The moment where what leads you to go like, my boyfriend is growing hair, I'm going to take it to a lab and have them genetically analyze it for DNA. I mean, I get that this is a weird situation, but that's a bit of a leap.
See, now I could see like Dana Scully doing that though.
Well, yeah, but if
we're in the X-Files universe, I could see her going, hey, you know what? I'm gonna have this checked out. But yeah.
But also, she just has like access to an FBI lab. I mean, where did Ronnie go for this?
Right. Well, she's a journalist. She might have connections.
That's true.
Yeah.
She might know a lab or two.
I don't know. That seems a little weird to me. I've always kind of wondered. The other thing I've always wondered is where the hell is Jeff Goldblum getting all these baboons?
I mean, he is working with a research facility that is providing him funding.
Well, yeah, but he always says like they've never put together what he's working on. So he's like, I just asked for, a laser and some computer chips, and that, they know I'm working on like some vague computer stuff, but they never don't you think they're going to start asking where he's like, and I need like 6 live baboons?
There's actually on the DVD, there's a deleted scene where I kind of wish they would have kept it in, but there was actually a deleted scene where there's a first creature made. He actually does form a hybrid fusion of a baboon and a cat,
which is from the original film.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did actually do that scene in the movie, and he's running around the lab, beating this thing, and so that wasn't there. But apparently, from what I understood, the baboons that they used at the film were pretty aggressive, because baboons are or can be aggressive. But apparently, again, Jeff Goldblum was able to keep them calm.
Well, I mean, it's Jeff Goldblum.
And that's what I think. There's something magical about this human. I don't know what it is, but they said if Jeff Goldblum hadn't been working with the baboons, they probably would have wreaked havoc.
Yeah, I mean, I love how much of just like random bits of Jeff Goldblum got worked into this movie. Like, like the scene at the beginning where he's just like, hey, wander into my apartment and let me explain my experiment to you. But first, some jazz piano. Like, there is no reason for that to be in the movie other than just Jeff Goldblum.
Which he actually played too.
Well, yeah, I know. One of our mutual friends that we all know just recently got to sing with Jeff Goldblum.
Right.
On stage, and we are all super duper jealous of her.
Oh, I know who that was. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's not like we're all super duper jealous of you, sweetheart.
I mean,
we love her and we stand her, but it's not like we're jealous.
No, not at all.
Not at all. No, none of us are sitting around going like, I wish.
Oh no, I'm not at all thinking about how cool it would be to sing with Jeff Goldblum.
No. I have a list of songs I would love to sing with Jeff Goldblum. No, that's but I just love that moment in the movie where I was just like, and right. when you first watch the movie, like if you don't know the background of that, you're just like, why is that there?
It's to show a very clear arc, because you notice he doesn't play piano after he turns into a hybrid.
Well, he doesn't play piano after that scene.
The reason for that is flies aren't known for playing piano, so they wanted to show a very clear.
Well, yes, I mean a very clear delineation between humans that can play piano.
That's the behavioral change, because
I've
never seen a fly play Chopin, so I'm just assuming that they're not.
The flies in your house don't just sit down at your keyboard and play piano. Mine are known for ragtime concerts personally, but no. Damn.
No. The silverfish play some mean chopsticks, but not the flies.
I mean, okay. I mean, maybe I just don't have enough silverfish in my house, but the house flies are just constantly getting down. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is I just always thought this movie was the first time I ever saw a real life person bring up I have the same outfit multiple times in my closet. That had always been a cartoon thing to me until this movie. And then I saw it in this movie, and I was like, see, I'm always jealous of cartoon characters when they do that. And now here's like a real person doing that. And I was so jealous. And then they made it a point of like personal growth that she got him a different outfit. And I'm like, no, you've ruined it. I mean, he looks hot in that leather jacket, but you've kind of ruined it, because I was like, man, that is cool as hell. I just want like 6 of the same outfit.
I mean,
you can't change Seth. He'll do that himself.
Yeah, I mean, I do that himself.
I do like his reasoning. His reasoning, like, well, I don't have to think about what to wear every day. I can just pick the next one on the rack.
Which he does say in Jurassic Park too.
Yeah, and I was like, that just, that was always my reasoning. I was like, that seems so easy. I don't have to think about coordinating an outfit.
Right.
It's just you have like an outfit. It looks good on you. You don't have to think about it. I'm still trying to do that as an adult. I've sort of gotten it down. I'm almost there. I'm getting closer and closer to my dream of just having like one outfit that looks good on me in multiples.
So let's actually talk about what this movie is known for, what Cronenberg is known for, the actual body horror. He throughout the movie, Brundle is chewing on his fingernails, and when he does, they come off, and he's ripping each and every fingernail off. Oh. That is, even now, it's still kind of, knowing that's a special effect, but still kind of, gives me the shakes. And then like
the one that got to me was when his teeth started to fall out on the keyboard.
Yeah, because he's chewing on a pen because he can't chew on his fingernails anymore.
Right. Oh, and then obviously the infamous vomiting scene when he starts vomiting on his food.
Oh, and
before he eats, and
this movie is how I learned how flies eat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had never heard that.
The enzyme, digestive enzymes, yeah.
Yeah. And after that, I was just like, okay, flies can never land on anything ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Go away. You're disgusting and I hate you.
I mean, flies mostly eat poop anyway, so... But for me, it was like the ear. When his ear falls off.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Ronnie, what a freak you are, because, like, his ear falls off, and she's just like, oh, you poor baby, let me hug you. And I'm like, Ronnie, can you maybe not hug the gross man who just had his ear fall off?
Gina Davis's initial reaction to the ear falling off was actually unscripted. That was how she reacted to that scene, and Cronenberg kept it in.
Her initial reaction was to hug him?
Well, no, her initial, like, the initial, like, shock at first, but then, yeah. But, Mel Brooks did, there again, hit and jumping in. He told Cronenberg, go as far as you want to with this.
Even if it's a line too far for Vincent Price.
Even if it's too far for Price.
As you want to.
Yep.
You go there, man. I mean... this is the guy who had done Scanners, so...
Yeah.
I mean, he's done Head Explosion, so he's gonna go there.
I mean, we do get the Head Explosion in this movie.
Well, eventually, we have a Head Explosion.
Yeah.
But it's just... and then that museum of discarded body parts in his medicine cabinet there.
Right.
Yeah.
That is such an interesting thing of like, why was he keeping that?
Some semblance of his humanity, I guess. He may not have humanity in him, but he's got parts of his humanity that he can hold on to. And plus, since teleporting out, he's gotten a little bit more narcissistic. Like, the Brundle Museum of Body Parts.
So you think they're like trophies, yeah.
Yeah, And also, let's change this documentary about the telepods to a documentary about me and how Brundlefly exists, how Brundlefly eats, and you can show it to children.
I mean, in a way, he's not entirely wrong. I mean, he's entirely wrong about maybe the kids, although kids love disgusting things. But the idea of documenting the first of a new species,
well, that's what a scientist would think.
Absolutely fascinate scientists. I mean,
yeah, right.
Can you imagine what a scientist would do to you if you were like, yeah, I had a new species right at my fingertips and I didn't even take a picture?
Yeah, even though the experiment ultimately was a mistake and resulted in Brundlefly. I mean, to a scientist thinking, and especially since he's not thinking clearly at this point, but he's still thinking like a scientist. This is groundbreaking. This is a new species. I'm a new species. So I could see that from that angle.
Well, the thing is that you see it earlier that when she is emotionally uninvested in the outcome of the research, she understands the scientific documentation process.
Right.
She doesn't understand it later because, she is now emotionally entangled in what is going on with Seth.
Right.
But, when they turn the baboon inside out, she turns the camera on Seth and she's like, well, what are you thinking? He's like, well, I'm thinking fuck, which is one of the greatest lines in movie history. And perfectly delivered at that moment, because you're waiting for him to say something profound, and that's what he comes up with, which is exactly what you would be thinking at that moment.
Right.
You think you're going to have a breakthrough, and that's what you get, and of course that's what you're going to be thinking. But she understands in that moment, yes, that's what you need to learn to talk to the camera, because this is an important scientific breakthrough, and as we work through it, we will need to document all of it, success and failure.
But it also plays into early movie sets social awkwardness.
Right.
Well, yes, but in going back to Brundlefly is a failure of the initial experiment. The initial experiment is create a teleportation device that can move people from place to place without the need for a car or an airplane or a boat or whatever. Brundlefly is a massive failure for the initial experiment.
Right.
But even so, documenting that teaches us a lot. It teaches us about the creation of a new species. It teaches us about the potential for DNA fusion. It teaches us about, recombinant DNA and how it works. And it teaches us about, scientifically speaking, Seth is correct, even in his addled state.
Right.
She can't see that because of, the way her emotions are playing into it, of course. But he's not wrong. I mean, he's an asshole, but he's not wrong. And it is interesting that it is both a fascinating act of narcissism and also a fascinating act of science at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
I absolutely love Ronnie's arc from the moment that, I love Ronnie's arc throughout the movie, but as she realizes, what's going on with Seth, and then she gets that whammy of, and now you're pregnant.
Right.
And she realizes that, they don't explicitly say it in the movie, but from her reaction, she realizes that potentially from how far along she is, there is a possibility that it is Brundlefly's baby and not Seth's baby.
Right.
Because they go at it for a while after the first teleportation.
Right.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that it's never an exact science unless you're, doing some sort of IVF or something. So her reaction being, well, when exactly, in the process did this happen?
Right.
And of course, Seth doesn't know either. So when he finds out, he begs her to keep the baby because it might be the only bit of his humanity left. If it's just Seth's child, then it is the only bit of just Seth that still exists. But of course, Ronnie knows that there is an equally good possibility that it is Brundlefly's child.
Are we counting Fly 2 as canon here? Because then we find out the answer.
Well, I mean, we're talking about just what she knows at the moment.
Right.
I mean, definitely Fly 2 says that it is definitely Brundlefly's child.
Right.
But Cronenberg, here's the fascinating thing about that. Cronenberg wrote this film to never have a sequel.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He never wanted this film to have a sequel. He never wanted any of his films to have sequels. Cronenberg is very anti-sequel as a filmmaker. He says that he writes his films to have definitive endings, as in he wants them to be standalones.
And you can see that here. I mean, this clearly ends where he wants it to end. I mean,
but now we're in the age of Hollywood where it's all about franchises,
right?
Sequels, reboots, remakes, because according to the data, that's what sells. So a director like Cronenberg probably would not be as successful in modern Hollywood as he would have been in that point in Hollywood.
Right.
Well, I mean, you say modern Hollywood, but I mean, David Cronenberg's most recent film came out this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but I think he already made a name for himself. If David Cronenberg was starting his career today in current state Hollywood, would he be able to do that? Probably not.
That's also true, but I mean, there are still some directors who are, in that same kind of vein. But the thing is that Cronenberg was never the most box office smash director.
I'd put him with like David Lynch in kind of the same thing. The more of the auteur kind of films, not necessarily mainstream. And a lot of his films have become cult films, mainly. But I mean, he wasn't afraid of turning people off or not being popular or not, being mainstream. I never got that vibe from Cronenberg, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, this and The Dead Zone are probably his two most mainstream popular films.
Right.
As in, like, that just the average moviegoer has probably heard of.
And potentially Scanners too, but yeah.
I mean, maybe Scanners, but I think most people these days would know that more as a GIF.
Right.
Yeah.
As in, like, it's kind of disconnected of they've seen that image of the exploding head rather than they know where it comes from.
That's true. I can see that.
But, I'm not sure a lot of people really understand, like, where that comes from, But the thing is that, Ronnie trying to decide, like, she has that brief moment, but she very quickly makes up her mind that even if there is the most infinitesimal chance that this could be Brundlefly's kid.
Right.
That is her body horror.
Right.
There are a lot of movies about the body horror aspects of pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And the movie doesn't really, this movie doesn't really get into them except for just kind of in the abstract.
Outside of the the nightmare, not really, you know?
Well, right. But even in the nightmare, it's very quick. You don't really see, like, her body being pregnant or anything, you know, it's just kind of that one brief shot. But, you know, it's just kind of all in her head of what could happen, you know. It's a very kind of imagined state rather than her actually having to go through it. Just the very idea of she might have to carry a child that is not entirely human.
Right.
In a very almost kind of Rosemary's Baby kind of way. That is its own kind of horror for her that is sort of briefly lived in this film. You know, like we said, if you want to take the sequel into account, you can. But in this film, you know, she's living with it. You would assume the way this movie ends that right after it fades to black, she's heading immediately back to the clinic. Because that's what this movie leads you to believe.
Right.
That as soon as the final confrontation with Brundlefly is over, Stathis is going to the ER to, you know, get his wounds treated too, and she is immediately finding the nearest clinic and being like, no,
oh yeah,
this
definitely.
this nightmare has to end.
Well, and that's where there's definitely a big shift too, with Seth, because he's only thinking of him and his legacy, I guess you could say, because you know, he wants her initially, of course, to carry the baby because he feels like that's all that's left of him. That's his humanity is fading, and that might be the only thing that's left at that point. So but he's also, not even considering her fears there.
Here's the question. When he first hears about the baby, is he thinking about his legacy of that could be the last vestiges of Seth, or is he thinking, if you give birth to that baby, I have pure Brundle DNA to use?
I mean, that's a good point. It's a good point. I've always interpreted it the first way myself, that it was, you know, there was a part of him that was trying to cling on to whatever he could because he knew that there was no turning back. He was becoming the Brundlefly. He was losing all vestiges of humanity, so that would be it. But we've also talked about his more narcissistic, scientific-y side, I guess, or the parts of him that are still thinking that way. And I could see him like, okay, well, there's pure DNA that could be used here.
Yeah, I mean,
because he does try early on. He does try to reverse the process. So maybe that's something he's considering.
And then, you know, he tries to fuse them. You know, that's his last gambit.
Right, to fuse them all together.
Let's be the perfect pure family. We'll be, you know, the three of us in one.
That's a red flag right there. I can see her being concerned.
Yeah. But if she is carrying his child and it's Seth's child and there's no fly DNA in there, then not only does he have a pure human DNA pattern, but he's got two pure human DNA patterns, one of which contains his original DNA.
Right.
And so the thought that it might be, I mean, still, you know, even if it's Brundlefly's kid, it's still two DNA patterns, which is like, you know, human and a half going in. So, you know, still he's got mostly human DNA to add to the mix. Still a good chance to take from his, you know, coin flip kind of situation.
Right.
He either gets a really good genetic match and he doesn't have to wait, or he gets a mostly good genetic match.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not perfect.
Takes a gamble on it, right?
Yeah.
Either way, he's going to have his, or part of his humanity back.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's grasping at that. He's grasping on what little the humanity he might be able to gain.
I think by the time he gets her back to the apartment, he realizes that the transformation is going too fast and he cannot wait for her to have the child.
Right.
We literally see it as his skin is shedding, and we see the, any signal of his humanity is gone. He's just this human-sized wingless fly.
Well, I mean, when he decides to put her in the pod, because that's when he starts, dragging her towards, and she, takes a swing at him, and that's when the final transformation begins.
Right.
But I think when he first comes to get her from the clinic, he's sincere in wanting to just try to get her to keep the kid.
Right.
But whether or not he's trying to get her to keep the kid because he's like, hey, I'm going to be a fly soon and that's going to be the last of human me, or whether he's like, well, if I can keep enough of my brain together long enough for her to have the kid, I can just take the kid and that'll be a really good source of Brundle DNA. I've never been able to kind of figure out which way I want to go on that.
Right.
But I think by the time he gets her back to the apartment and is like, I think after the attack and stuff, when he's like, yeah, I'm just disintegrating a dude's limbs, I think he finally realizes, like, yeah, I'm too far gone if I'm going to retain any part of my human brain.
Well, he doesn't kill him, so there's a bit of control there, I think. But, because he could have killed Stathis.
Well, he was gonna, and the only thing that stopped him was her. So I think he was like, well, maybe if I've got like her brain fused in here too, I'll get some morality back. That might be nice. So I don't know. I mean,
but yeah, that entire Brundle fly look, that part animatronic, part guy in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
The whole transformation of the skin peeling off, and then it's just this human-sized fly. I love the way it looks. I love the way it moves. Even now, it still holds up, at least to me.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I find it super interesting that I feel more empathy for fully transformed Brundlefly than I do for Seth at the beginning of the transformation. I don't know if I'm the only one who does. To me,
I mean, not when he's trying to dissolve people or fuse his girlfriend into a single creature. I mean, that's
honestly, kinda, yeah, because to me, once he's that far gone, I'm almost like he cannot help what he is any longer.
And that makes sense.
At the beginning of the movie, when he's like dragging the chick from the bar in and being like, hey, stop fighting me. You're really going to like it. I thought you were cool. Get in the pod.
Right.
He's still like 95% human at that point.
So he's still Seth-driven is what you're thinking.
He's still Seth at that point with like a little bit of fly.
Whereas at the end, he's becoming all fly, so he's just basically in control. The instincts of the fly are controlling him at that point.
Yeah, and like at that point, I'm like, okay, so that's,
So who do we think, because that's a really good point, who do we think asked to have the trigger pulled?
I think is
that a bit of Seth, or is that the fly?
Seth. I think that was the final bit of Seth.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think there's that little bit there that finally realizes, no, this is it. He's in pain. He's there's no turning back.
I mean, he literally has pieces of metal in his body. I mean,
that last failed attempt when the process was stopped has basically morphed him beyond any recognition, and he's just too far gone at that point.
And just having the bits of metal fused with flesh sticking out of that.
He knows he'll never be able to fly a plane, because he's never getting through the detector. So that's, he can't travel. That's out the window.
He is permanently on the no-fly list at this point.
Right. Yeah. So he's just like, if I can't take the trip, to Ireland this summer,
I mean, even if there's like a cute lady fly at some point, you know, he's already ruined it.
Right. Yeah.
He's no longer hot, sexy Brundlefly.
He is not at the end. No, I would agree.
Yeah. That ending, it's really interesting that even though the two stories diverge, it is fascinating how the ending is almost exactly the same.
Only in the original film, it was a press. This one is a shotgun.
Yeah.
Well, Murica. The original was supposed to be in like France or something.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's right. The original story was French, and then the film was set in Canada, so they could have American actors with French names. So they set it in Quebec. So it was like, that's why they all have French names but speak with American accents.
Right.
But yeah, so like, you know, the original one was French, but like, this is America, so we gotta have a gun.
Yeah.
And I just kind of do like how the movie just ends right there. Like, there's no prologue.
There's no happily ever after.
No, it just
ends. I don't think they needed it here. I think that was fine because it was basically the resolution, you know. And that's very Cronenberg too, because like we said, he's not thinking sequel, he's not thinking follow-up. This is the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, like, you know, red and blue lights as the cops pull up or any. I mean, it just, like, she pulls the trigger and falls to her knees, and that's it. Yeah. Hard cut to black. I mean, this is a movie that begins harshly and ends harshly.
Right.
I mean, it begins with Jeff Goldblum being like, so I'm about to change the world with a scientific invention. You're like, who are you? Why are you talking to me? Where are we? Like, this movie does not, like, ease you into the story. Jeff Goldblum is just like, hey, you want to come see my telepod? And you're like, what? Okay.
And you're like, well, you're Jeff Goldblum, so I'm not going to say no.
Like, you're Jeff Goldblum. I'll go anywhere you want.
I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
Telepod, you say? All right.
Yeah. You going to play the piano for me? I'll go. We're down.
Piano on a telepod. That sounds perfect.
We would get the sequel, 1989's The Fly 2, directed by Chris Wallace, who was responsible for the special effects in this film.
Yeah, the Academy Award winner.
Yeah. But there were other attempts to revitalize the franchise after The Fly 2. Apparently they were going to pull a Halloween and do a sequel with Gina Davis that just ignored The Fly 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
they were going to do the timeline switch?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that, yeah.
So apparently they were going to do, it was called Flies, and Gina Davis ends up having twins.
Oh, they were going to try the aliens trick.
Yeah. There was a planned remake in 2003, which never happened. Cronenberg himself was going to do some sort of follow-up in 2009, but him and 20th Century Fox could not come into an agreement on the budget.
Right.
Never happened. Not to say that, but now that the franchise is in the hands of Disney, who knows?
True. Yeah.
I mean, Disney just released the reboot of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
So who knows?
That's true. That's a very good point. Yeah.
I hate to say it, but come on, you know that the reason The Fly 2 failed is because it didn't have Jeff Goldblum.
Technically, it did.
It did in a flashback.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up by asking the question, does The Fly 1986 have the magic? As our guest, Jeff, I will ask you that question. Does The Fly have the magic?
Does it have the magic? Absolutely. The Fly is one of my all-time favorite movies, horror or otherwise. I think it's a brilliantly performed and executed film. Just the great Cronenberg, the body horror, like we said, the character arc that he goes through. I think the ending is perfect. I can't see it being any other way. An allegory for illness and getting old. I think it's that perfect 80s horror movie. So absolutely.
Kiki.
Yes, haven't you been listening?
I will.
Oh, I forgot to mention it's got Jeff Goldblum, but I figure she'll do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a Jeff Goldblum movie. It's got lots of Jeff Goldblum. It's got a whole lot of Jeff Goldblum.
Almost all of Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
Almost entirely Jeff Goldblum. No, I mean it really is. I mean, even besides the silliness of that, it really is kind of a fascinating existential piece of, like Jeff said, kind of humanity and disease or aging, or just what happens when your body isn't what you think it is. Hard relate with that. It's so different from the source material, and I hate to say it, but I kind of like the changes better.
I'm going to agree with you. I think it's a vast improvement over the original film. And the original film was a classic. But the fact that it goes so far into the body horror, it goes so far into just this brilliant scientist just devolves in more ways than one to this very brutal beast almost. And yeah, it's still one of my favorite movies. Still one of my favorite 80s movies. Still one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's just, yeah, it's a classic. And it's on HBO Max for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good old HBO Max for now.
Now would be a good time to start considering that physical copy if you.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? But by this point next year, it might be on Hulu. Or whatever Disney Plus decides to merge all of that into. It is one more note about The Fly 2. It always just makes me laugh that the offspring of Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis ended up looking like Eric Stoltz. Jeff, as a first-time guest, you do have one request, and we will do that request in a future episode. Jeff, what is your request?
My request is going to be one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. It's a newer one. It is, of course, horror. It is owned by Fox, so it covers all that criteria. And I'm going to pick 28 Days Later.
Ooh, we haven't done the zombies yet, so that's going to be
it's time.
Fast
it's time.
Zombies too.
And fast zombies. My 2 favorite movies have fast zombies.
So, Jeff, is there anything you want to plug while you're here?
Sure. You can find my my YouTube channel, which has all my music, horror and non-horror. It's where I post videos just in general and some produced stuff. That's Jeff Whitmire 47. I do have a Bandcamp page that I'm working on updating. It's jeffwhitmire.bandcamp.com. Keep an eye on that because I am working on a horror movie album called Stabby Road. Hopefully going to be done very soon with that. And you can follow me on Twitter, which is at Jeff Whitmire1. I'm very active on Twitter.
So we are moving away from the spooky season, getting into November. November will be for us Disaster Month, as we are doing an entire month of disaster movies. It's just going to be 2 whole months of just 20th Century Fox movies at this point.
No,
it makes sense.
Some of them will not be. It turns out that Disney got really into the disaster craze at one point. So, yeah.
It does kind of make sense to put the disaster month the same month as the election.
So we are kicking off Disaster Month with The Poseidon Adventure from 1972.
Nice.
I don't know if I ever watched this movie the whole way, so it's going to be a very interesting watch.
This was one of my favorite movies as a kid. It was on all the time in my house. So, yeah.
So come back next week for the start of Disaster Month with The Poseidon Adventure, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
If you want to help the fight for human rights in the U.S., the American Civil Liberties Union works to protect constitutional rights for all Americans. Their website is aclu.org. If you need reproductive services in the U.S. or wish to donate to those who do, go to abortionfunds.org for more info. The battle isn't over until the last person surrenders. The fight continues.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic,
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic,
and of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.